Hello and welcome to another edition of Professor Speaks. My name is Alex Hernandez. Alongside me, as always, Dr. Craig Stern. And our topic for today is going to be the flu. So we are in the middle of the flu season, and we just want to mention a couple things about flus and flu vaccines, and go into the latest news. And some of the latest news is that the flu has gotten stronger over the years, and we're probably in the strongest it's ever been this year. So, first and foremost, for our listeners who don't know, why do we have vaccines?
Yeah, that's a good question. The entire importance of vaccines is for prevention.
Right.
What we're trying to do is to prevent disease. Now, why do you care? Why do we want? We're looking at over 25 million cases of flu infection. Flu is a virus, so you can't treat it with an antibiotic. It's a virus and it causes somewhere around 25 million infections a year. Of that, there are over 330,000 hospitalizations. And of that, last year in 2016, there was about 12,000 people who died. So it's not a trivial problem. When we talk about doing a vaccine, we talk about prevention. It's not just that you're trying to prevent something and therefore there isn't any consequences. In a way, we've made things rather easy because the more that we have vaccines, the more prevention there is, the decrease in the number of hospitalizations of people that are getting severely ill. Because with the flu, you get the nasal problems, the runny nose and the sore throat and all of that. And then if it gets worse, it progresses to body aches and muscle problems. So what you're trying to do is to prevent the symptomatology and then ultimately trying to stop the hospitalizations.
Right. And like how many or before that, what are the consequences if people get the condition? The overall consequence in a macro perspective.
In a macro perspective, the good news is that the flu is very common and that people in general have the flu for 7 days, they get better and they're fine.
Right.
The problem is that the flu for babies is a problem. The flu for older people, people over 65, is a problem.
Right.
So what you're trying to do is to limit the problem so that people over 65 have the greatest risk of hospitalizations and death. Babies, of course, always have a risk of what goes on because they have no immunity.
Right.
But by the same token, older people have more medical conditions, and those medical conditions tend to decrease their immune system. And in decreasing their immune system, it means overall they tend to get sicker. What you want to do is to make sure they don't. Now, why do you want to give everybody the vaccine or the prevention? Because older people mix with younger people and everybody mixes in the same pool. And so as a result of that, the younger people who may get better in 7 days are going to infect the people who are older and they don't get better in 7 days.
Right. So how many of these consequences are prevented?
Well, that's the problem. I mean, it's a good thing. This is kind of a enormity of riches.
Okay.
You have a prevention. The prevention deals with the viruses and deals mostly with the viruses that occurred last year. So the bad news is you're always trying to track whatever happened the year before and trying to treat that. Now, the difficulty with that is that there's, in the case of influenza virus A and those also influenza virus B, in the case of influenza virus A, there's over 144 strains. So in every year, you can only attack maybe 2 to 4 to 6 of the different strains. In the case of the influenza type B, they don't do it with strains. It's handled differently, and there's a bunch of different options. Either way, you're dealing with a significant number of options, and in no way are you trying to control all of them because there is no vaccine at the present time that controls all of them. Now, there is a trivalent vaccine that's a high dose that's used in older people,
Okay.
because there's also something called senescence, which means that as you get older, your immune system doesn't respond as well to the vaccine. In the case of older people, it drops somewhere around 12% or more.
Okay.
And so it means that an older person may get the vaccine, good thing. Clearly, you have stopped or eliminated a significant number of the problem, over
Right.
88% of the problem, but then you still have a difficulty where the senescence is decreasing your immunity, your reliability in that regard, and you're dealing with those strains that were the major strains from the prior year. So that's always the issue that you have to do. It doesn't mean it's bad. Doesn't mean you shouldn't do it,
Mm-hmm.
because you do want to minimize those deaths. You want to minimize those hospitalizations. You want to minimize the number that are really sick, but you have to make sure that they're not. If they're not responding, how do you deal with it? And obviously, we have a focus on the people that are over 65 as having the greatest risk of complications.
Right. And this might be a straightforward question, but you had mentioned several different forms of the influenza vaccine. Just in a general sense, why are there so many different forms of the flu vaccine?
Different manufacturers look at the problem and say, we need to use these particular strains. Another one says we need to use a few other strains.
Right.
There are such things as trivalent, meaning multiple, 3 strains or more, quadrivalent, meaning 4 strains or more. And what they're all trying to do is to find a better, more effective process. Now, over time, all of the prevention decreases in effectiveness, all of them.
Okay.
But you want to have something that's going to be effective between around the beginning of flu season, which is somewhere around September, early October, through March, when the majority of the flu season is. And then each of the manufacturers changes it somewhere around twice a year,
Okay.
so that they can try and come up with something that will deal with the flu consecutively. But you take it once a year, and hopefully whatever you took in the prior year is going to work, and you're going to have something that's going to be available.
And
By the way, there
yeah,
is one other
yeah,
thing
go
to
ahead.
say. In the older people, there is a form of vaccine that's intranasal, meaning you put it in the nose and you sniff it up, and it goes into your bronchioles by breathing it versus getting a shot for it. That is not approved for older people. That's for younger people. So there are different forms that can be given, some of which are approved for a given age groups,
Mhm.
and some of which are not.
Well, out of the dosage forms, which one would be better than the other? Is there one that is better than the other? Like, say, stronger or more efficient in how you
The,
get it into your system?
the real issue today is more of the trivalent kind that has 3 different strains
Okay.
of influenza A, and depending on the strength. And there are recommendations that the higher strength is for older people over 65, and the lower strengths are for those that are younger people in order to deal with it. And the increased strength and what they call adjuvant type
Okay.
is there because what it does is it includes something else besides the antiviral to boost the immune system. So people who are over 65 need that boost, as I was talking about, because they've lost somewhere around 10, 12% of the effectiveness. So you get the little boost to try and make it better and make it even more effective to what it does.
Okay. Well, let's shift gears here. We've seen there's been several videos out there. We've seen it on Facebook Live with other Facebook videos called Now This. I believe that's the name of the Facebook site. They have posted a video about studies being done. I believe it's mostly in Europe and the UK, where they talk about a universal flu vaccine. Um, can you explain any of this? Like, what is a universal flu vaccine?
Yeah, without getting overly technical, the issue here is the following.
Mm-hmm.
And it is being used and it's being tested right now in Europe. It's
Okay.
not here in the United States. The good news is we'll find out how the testing goes. And yes, the Europeans are ahead of us in trying it out. But the universal vaccine is the following. If you have more than one different type of influenza type A virus,
Okay.
and we know that there's at least 144 of them,
Oh, yeah.
and you know that there are multiple types of influenza type B virus. They're not serotyped the same way as influenza A, but it doesn't matter. There's a lot.
Right.
So there's a lot of types of A, a lot of types of B. Well, when you build a vaccine, a trivalent, a quadrivalent, you're only dealing with 3 types or 4 types, but there's 144 A types.
Mm-hmm.
So now the question is, how do you get all of them? Because when you take your shot, you're taking a shot once a year in order to cover the strains that you believe to be important this year based on what was there last year. But suppose there was a universal vaccine that covered all 144 of the A types and all the B types. You had one way to deal with it,
Okay.
and it would last a much longer time than the current ones. So you didn't have to take a shot once a year. You had those that were covering everything. So if people get sick, even though they've had a flu shot, they're getting sick because there are other strains that were not part of the flu vaccine.
Right.
This way, everything would be covered. So we'll see how it works out and what it is, and clearly what the consequences are. But if that's true, then prevention is moved up. It's raised up to a higher level because now you're not just worrying about what happened last year, but you're trying to address all of the different types and do that. It's a great idea. People have been working on it since the mid-90s.
Mm-hmm.
Now the question is, can they actually make it work so that it can be generally available? And we'll find out as the trials go on in England and others.
Yeah. It's definitely an interesting topic, and we hope they succeed in it. But one thing for our listeners, they want to know who they can consult when they talk about the flu vaccine. Like, who do you trust? Who are the experts in this field?
Yeah. Doctors obviously have always had a certain expertise in this, but
Right.
there's also a significant benefit that clinical pharmacists have a specialty in this, and there's a subspecialty with regard to vaccines, and they are educating other pharmacists that don't have a specialty in it, so that pharmacists in general are now a second source of major information in order to give people the appropriate information. So certainly doctors have knowledge about it, pharmacists have knowledge about it, and certainly a group of them who are expert and deal with this all the time. It's relatively simple to get a flu shot these days.
Right.
Because you can get it at a hospital, you can get it from your doctor, you can walk into a pharmacy and you can get it. So the administration of it is not really the problem. It's generally available. But the expertise of what you want, that's out there. And people need to say, look, I don't understand enough about it. There's been a lot of media that has gone on about whether people are autistic or whether they get a muscle nerve problem called Guillain-Barré and other things.
A lot
In
of
reality,
conspiracy theories. Yeah.
a lot of conspiracy theories, and the people who wrote those papers have been discredited. They have denounced their own papers and identified them as being phony. Our problem here is prevention, and what we're dealing with is herd immunity.
Right.
If the herd has some people who get the shot and some people who don't, then the people who get sick infect the people who already had the shot.
Right.
And what we have then is this constant problem. Prevention is prevention. What we're trying to do is to stop it. Yes, there's the issues that can occur, and in every study out there, whether it was any of the problems, Guillain-Barré or otherwise, what's been identified is that even if there was an issue, it's 1 or 2 cases per million out of so many. Now,
Right.
that probably doesn't help the person who gets it, but at the end of the day, we're trying to help the entire population, not just to deal with 1 or 2.
Right.
So doctors, pharmacists, certainly some nursing is involved, but there's a lot of expertise out there now. When you go to your pharmacy, it's commonly available, it's commonly easy to access, etc., and to get that information.
Great. And thank you for the information. And we hope the information has been helpful to you at home. And if you have any comments, please leave them below in the comment section. If you have any messages or you want a private message, you can send us a private message. Feel free to visit propharmaconsultants.com. We have a free information exchange page called RxInfoX. And please leave us a comment about it as well if you have any comments about the page. And we will have another video for you next week, and we hope to see you then.